In the city of Accra, there lived a couple, Kofi and Ama. They were very much in love, and everyone who knew them could see the deep bond they shared. Kofi worked as a mechanic in a busy garage where cars roared to life under his skilled hands. Ama ran a small food stall by the roadside, where she sold fried plantains, a favorite snack among the locals. Her stew was spicy, hot, and flavorful, attracting people from all corners of the city. They lived in a simple but cozy home, filled with laughter and joy. Though they had a happy life, there was one thing that puzzled their friends and family. Kofi and Ama never celebrated Valentine's Day. It wasn't that they didn't love each other. No, it was quite the opposite. They loved each other deeply, but they avoided Valentine's Day every single year. No gifts. No flowers. Nothing special. People would ask them, "Why don't you celebrate it like everyone else?" But neither Kofi nor Ama would give a real answer. It was as if they both carried a secret, something they feared about that day. Kofi and Ama had met when they were teenagers. Kofi had always been the cheerful type, his smile lighting up every room he entered. Ama was kind and gentle, with a laugh that made even the most serious people crack a smile. They first crossed paths during a community festival in their village, where Kofi was working as a volunteer. Ama was selling fried plantains, and Kofi was drawn to the sweet aroma of the food. From that moment, they became inseparable. Kofi and Ama spent their days talking, laughing, and dreaming together. They shared simple pleasures, like watching the sunset by the beach or strolling through the busy streets of Accra. Their love was pure and strong, yet they both knew there was something strange about Valentine's Day that they could never shake off. They didn't talk much about it, but somehow, they both avoided it. One day, Kofi decided to break the silence. "Ama," he said, "why don't we ever celebrate Valentine's Day like everyone else? I see the others exchanging gifts and flowers. We never do any of that. What's going on?" Ama's face grew serious, and she looked down at her feet. "Kofi, it's just a feeling I have," she replied softly. "My grandmother told me a story when I was a little girl. She said that Valentine's Day is cursed for people like us. Every couple that tried to celebrate it suffered something bad." Kofi chuckled, thinking it was just an old superstition. "Come on, Ama. You don't believe in that, do you?" But Ama's eyes were filled with worry. "I don't know, Kofi. But my mother always told me to stay away from the day. And she's not the only one. My grandmother's story has passed down through generations." Kofi felt uneasy. He didn't believe in such things, but the sadness in Ama's voice made him wonder. Still, he brushed it off, thinking it was just a superstition. As time went by, Kofi couldn't shake the feeling that something was always off about Valentine's Day. Every year, without fail, something strange happened on that day. The weather would suddenly turn chilly, and the air would feel thick, as if the city itself was holding its breath. No matter how much Kofi tried to ignore it, he couldn't. And every time, he noticed that Ama would look at the calendar with nervous eyes, as if waiting for the day to come and go without any trouble. This year, however, Kofi made a decision. "Ama," he said, "this year, I want to do something special for you. I want to give you flowers and tell you how much I love you on Valentine's Day. I know we haven't celebrated it before, but I think it's time." Ama smiled softly but didn't say anything. It was clear she didn't want to argue, so Kofi thought she was okay with the idea. He spent the whole morning preparing a bouquet of flowers and writing a heartfelt note. "To my love, every day with you is special, but today, I want to remind you how much I cherish you," it read. Kofi was excited to surprise Ama, but deep down, a small part of him was worried about what might happen. On the morning of Valentine's Day, Kofi woke up early to prepare the surprise. He dressed in his best clothes, took the bouquet, and set off to Ama's food stall, excited to see her reaction. As he walked through the busy streets of Accra, he couldn't help but feel that strange sensation again. The air was thick, and the streets were busier than usual. Kofi shrugged it off and hurried to Ama's stall. But as he turned the corner, he froze. A large crowd had gathered around a car that had crashed into a tree. His heart dropped when he saw the car, It was Ama's cousin, who had been driving her to the market that morning. Kofi pushed through the crowd, his heart racing. When he reached the front of the scene, he saw Ama's cousin lying on the ground, hurt badly, but there was no sign of Ama. Panic gripped his chest. "Where's Ama?" Kofi shouted, his voice trembling. Someone pointed to the ambulance where Ama was being rushed. Her face was pale, and her body was limp. Kofi ran after the ambulance, praying she was still alive. At the hospital, Kofi sat in the waiting room, his hands shaking. He couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Why had this accident occurred today, of all days? Was this the curse Ama's family had warned about? He couldn't help but feel guilty. He had pushed her into celebrating Valentine's Day, and now, something terrible had happened. Hours passed, and Kofi sat by the window, staring out at the busy streets of Accra. He kept telling himself that Ama would be fine, that she was strong. But deep inside, he feared that he might lose her forever. The weight of his decision to celebrate Valentine's Day hung heavily over him. Just as Kofi was about to give up hope, a strange woman appeared in the waiting room. She was dressed in a bright, colorful kente cloth, and her face was kind but serious. "Are you Kofi?" she asked. Kofi nodded, unsure of who she was. "I'm Ama's grandmother," the woman said quietly. "I've come to tell you something important about your love." Kofi stared at the woman, his heart racing. "Ama's grandmother?" he whispered. "What's going on? Is she okay?" The woman sat down beside him, her voice soft but filled with authority. "I know you're worried, Kofi. But there's something you need to understand. The accident, it didn't happen by chance. Valentine's Day carries a curse for people like Ama and me." The woman began to tell Kofi the story of the curse. "Many years ago, I was in love with a man," she said. "We were planning to get married, and like you, we thought it was a good idea to celebrate Valentine's Day together. But that same day, he died in a car accident. Since then, I have warned my family never to celebrate Valentine's Day. It's not just a superstition, Kofi, it's a warning. Love is precious, but there's something about this day that brings misfortune to couples like us." Kofi listened, stunned. He had always thought Ama's family was just being overly cautious, but now he was beginning to understand. The curse was real. Valentine's Day was dangerous for people like them. Kofi felt a cold shiver run down his spine as he thought about the terrible consequences of ignoring this warning. As the hours passed, Kofi continued to sit by Ama's side, waiting for her to wake up. The doctors had told him that she was in critical condition, but they were doing everything they could. Kofi's mind raced with thoughts of the curse and the strange events that had unfolded. Was this all his fault for pushing Ama into celebrating Valentine's Day? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ama opened her eyes. Her voice was weak, but she smiled when she saw Kofi. "I knew you would be here," she whispered. Kofi's heart swelled with relief. "Ama," he said, holding her hand tightly. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I shouldn't have made us celebrate Valentine's Day." Ama squeezed his hand gently. "It's not your fault, Kofi," she said softly. "I knew what would happen. But I love you, and nothing could change that." In the days that followed, Ama recovered, though slowly. Kofi stayed by her side, never leaving her for a moment. Ama's grandmother visited often to check on her, and Kofi could see that she carried a quiet wisdom that calmed his anxious heart. She spoke to them both about love, life, and the importance of understanding the deeper meaning of their relationship. "The curse," Ama's grandmother said one evening as they sat together, "is not really about bad luck. It's a lesson. Love isn't something to be celebrated on just one day. It's about the commitment you make every single day. Valentine's Day, for all its flowers and gifts, can become a distraction. It makes you think that love is something that should be shown only in grand gestures. But love is about the small, quiet things." Kofi listened intently, his mind slowly unraveling the meaning behind the strange occurrences. He had been so focused on trying to create a perfect moment for Ama on Valentine's Day, but he now saw how that day could lead people to lose sight of what mattered most, the consistency of love. As Ama continued to heal, Kofi reflected on everything he had learned. He realized that the curse wasn't about fear or avoiding Valentine's Day entirely. It was a reminder. The universe, or fate, or whatever force guided their lives, had a way of reminding them that their love wasn't meant to be shown in one grand gesture, but in how they treated each other every day. Kofi became determined to show Ama that he loved her through small acts, through the little things that showed he was always there for her. One morning, as Ama sat at her food stall, Kofi arrived with a cup of her favorite tea. He smiled as he placed it in front of her. "I didn't wait for Valentine's Day to tell you this," he said, looking her in the eyes. "But I love you, Ama. Every day with you is special." Ama's eyes softened. "You've always shown me that, Kofi. Maybe we didn't need a Valentine's Day to remind us." Days turned into weeks, and Ama grew stronger. With Kofi by her side, she found herself laughing more and worrying less. The shadow of the accident seemed to lift, and she began to see the beauty in the simple, everyday moments they shared. Their bond was stronger than ever, not because of a special day, but because of their commitment to one another. Ama's grandmother had been right. Love was about more than just one day of the year. Kofi and Ama began to make new traditions, ones that celebrated their love every day, without the need for grand displays. They spent quiet evenings together, shared meals, and laughed about silly things. Each day, they grew closer, learning to appreciate the ordinary moments that made their relationship extraordinary. Months passed, and life in Accra returned to its usual rhythm. Ama continued to run her food stall, and Kofi returned to his work as a mechanic. They no longer avoided Valentine's Day because they had learned that the day didn't hold the power to define their love. Instead, it was their everyday actions and their care for one another that mattered most. But even as they went back to their routines, Kofi and Ama never forgot the lesson they had learned. They understood that while the world around them was busy with celebrations, their love was something deeper than just a day on the calendar. Years later, when Kofi and Ama had children of their own, they shared the story of their love with them. They explained how they had learned the true meaning of love, not from grand gestures or gifts, but from the small, everyday moments. Valentine's Day became just another day on the calendar, and Kofi and Ama never felt the need to celebrate it. Instead, they made their own traditions, like walking along the beach together, having family dinners, and sharing stories late into the night. Their children grew up knowing that love wasn't just something to be celebrated on Valentine's Day. It was something to be lived every day. And though they never celebrated Valentine's Day, Kofi and Ama's love was stronger than ever. It was a love that had been tested, a love that had weathered storms and faced challenges. And through it all, they learned that the true meaning of love wasn't in the flowers, the gifts, or the special days. It was in the consistency of their commitment to each other. In the end, Kofi and Ama lived their lives peacefully, content in the love they shared. They grew old together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. And every year, as Valentine's Day came and went, they would smile quietly to themselves, knowing that love didn't need to be celebrated with gifts or flowers. Love, they understood, was in the small things, the little moments that made life beautiful. Though the world outside might have been full of hearts and roses on Valentine's Day, Kofi and Ama had something far more precious. They had a love that was built on trust, kindness, and understanding. A love that had been tested and strengthened over time. And that, in the end, was the greatest celebration of all. The story of Kofi and Ama became one that was told for generations. It wasn't about the curse of Valentine's Day or the fear that something terrible would happen. It was a story of how love could survive the hardest tests and how the most meaningful things in life were often the quietest and simplest. Kofi and Ama had learned that love wasn't about one special day. It was about the commitment to love every day, through thick and thin. And that, in itself, was the greatest gift of all.